All right. Hi again, everyone who's been able to register and sign into this call. I mean, I think that it is really just a perfect time to start having this conversation. But we're going to give as much time for people to log into the call as possible. So in the meantime, if you all want to go to the chat and answer this quick icebreaker question, which is today it's going to be, what was one big or small thing that you took for granted from before COVID? And I know I can give you my example, which is I really took for granted how easy it was to see my friends. Now it's just so much more of a circus just to get everybody in the same place, in the same room. So if you guys want to go to the chat and answer that icebreaker question, that would be great while we wait for people to log in.
Are we on the chat?
In the chat.
I need to answer a question.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see my friends at Special Olympics swimming.
She has missed that more than anything else. We took that for granted, and she realizes how much she took it for granted. So she's just going to be very happy when we get to go back and see our friends and participate. And
yeah, I mean, I hear you loud and clear. I see that folks in the chat are saying just how, like, for example, being able to go study at places like Starbucks. Yes, I didn't even think about that. Coffee shops I haven't been to sit down and have coffee in a while. Simple things we've been taking for granted. Bonfires, competitions. Movies. I love that one. I haven't been to a movie in a really long time.
I'm on a Zoom chat with getting back safely after COVID. What's going on? A chat meeting, a Zoom meeting.
Okay, so for the purposes of this, just to make it easier on, just for communication purposes, I'm going to ask everybody keep yourself on mute until we start having our community discussion after the presentation. So that's going to be coming up really, really soon. But please keep yourself on mute unless you want to bring something up to the group and we open it up for discussion. Okay, so any more insights about things that we took for granted from before COVID? Go ahead and put that in the chat. I'm seeing a few which I really think resonate with not only me, but with everybody in this call. Yeah, I hear you. Yes. Stressful days are, yeah. I hate to say, but stressful days might be kind of more normal now that COVID has come up.
I did tell you privately in the chat what's going on and why I'm not able to stay.
That's no problem. Thank you for the heads up. I'm just
and I'm going to
so
go
happy
ahead
you're
and
able to
have to
join
leave because I got to
second.
be able to relax.
No problem. Yes, you got to take care of yourself first and foremost, Emily. But I'm glad you're able to join at least for a minute. Love seeing you. Okay. Oh, I see a comment. Somebody was hospitalized with COVID. No, that's unfortunately, that's going to be the case with a few people. And I just hate to see that that's that's something that folks have to deal with now. Thank you for sharing that. All right, so actually maybe I can do a round robin for our panelists with what things that we took for granted from before COVID. That'll give us a couple more minutes to get as many people on the call as possible. So why don't I start with you, Sean, something that you took for granted from before COVID?
Hey everybody, yeah, I just put in the chat that I actually miss being busy preparing for Special Olympics competitions. Forgot what it was like to feel that, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do tomorrow? And emailing all the coaches back and saying, you forgot this and you forgot that, and we gotta do this, and all that fun stuff. So I definitely am excited about that. I love that feeling of running an event and how it just that little bit of stress is fun. So I miss that. I miss seeing everybody.
Okay. So how about you, Dr. Frost? Mind going next?
Not at all. Mine was already shared. I love going to the movies and seeing stories on the big screen. So I missed going to the movies very much.
Thank you for sharing that. Same. Lisa, do you mind going up next?
Yes, I would say I'm with Sean. I miss seeing the athletes and planning things. I kind of feel lost because I'm not always on the go like I was before. And then I would say the same as movies. I really love movies and haven't been able to do that either.
I mean, it's been a hard year. I think that everybody understands when we say that it's just been very complicated, and you know, a lot of us have been facing a lot of challenges, and we can't even see our friends to get that in-person emotional support. We have to be doing everything online now. So we see you guys. I miss coaching our athletes. I mean, same. I feel like that resonates with a lot of people on this call. Missing seeing our parents and family members, or SO family as well. Yes, for sure. It's just, I never realized there'd be a day where it'd be complicated to schedule a visit with my own family, right? Okay. So we're about 6 minutes into the hour, and I think this is a good starting point for us to get this, the conversation rolling. And we're competing with dinner time, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time here. But I know we all convened here today to talk about Special Olympics Tennessee and our journey to return to in-person activities, right? So this conversation is going to be giving us a really good outline of, first of all, COVID, how that's impacted our community, and also our response to COVID and how we've been keeping everybody safe, or as best as we can. And talking about what the future holds for our organization, for our athletes, for practices and competitions in the future. So just to give everybody an outline of what to expect today, we're going to start the call with a presentation that describes everything that we've been seeing in this new world. And we're going to conclude the conversation, or not conclude, but we're going to continue the conversation with an open community discussion. So that will be the part where everybody is welcome to unmute themselves, talk about their feelings, ask questions to the panelists and the group as a whole. And we can have that discussion that way. But don't leave quite until you're finished with a post-call survey. There'll be 3 questions that we'll be ending the call with, just so that I know that there aren't any more questions, and you guys can answer a few of ours to see if we did well on this call. Does that sound good with everyone? Perfect. I see lots of nods. If you have questions in the meantime, please don't hesitate to write them in the chat, and then we can kind of open up the discussion to unmute at the end of the after the presentation has concluded. Does that sound good too? All right, I think that means that we are all set to start the slides. Jordan, if you don't mind. All right, so again, thanks so much to everyone who was able to join us on this really important call. I think the timing for this was really good because now we're looking towards the future, and I know that a few activities are coming up in terms of just in-person competitions, and I know Sean will be going more in depth with that, but just to reiterate that this is a good time to have this call and have this conversation so that we're all on the same page moving forward. Thanks again to everybody who answered the icebreaker question for things we took for granted for before COVID. I know there are just so many. And just a reminder again, the session is being recorded, so it'll be distributed to people who were, for whatever reason, missed this conversation, this call. So I think that takes care of the housekeeping. And I think that we're ready for the next slide, Jordan. All right, so this is by no means the actual pictures of the panel presenters today, but I feel like that captures their essence nonetheless. So Sean, VP of Sports, is on the call, who'll be heading up the conversation. Dr. Chris Frost, with our wonderful, wonderful health partner from LifePoint Health, has also joined the call to give that clinical perspective. Lisa Taylor, Area Director for Memphis. She'll be actually giving you all like that real life perspective from the area, from like on the ground area work that she's been doing. And then I'll be helping kind of navigate the conversation as the health manager for Special Olympics Tennessee. All right. And I think that actually kind of, starts off this conversation with you, Dr. Frost. If you could kind of give folks just an idea of this response that we've had to COVID and just how it's impacted us in just such a real way.
Yes. Thanks, Aisha. Yes, and thanks everybody for allowing us into your homes this evening. So 2020 was a crazy year to say the least, and we experienced the COVID pandemic. And the pandemic, we use that word a lot, but just so everyone knows, the definition of a pandemic is a disease that affects a whole country, or in this particular case, the whole world. And just think about at your houses and at your schools and your places of work, when people get sick and the family gets sick, or the household gets sick, or a lot of your classmates or workmates get sick, that's a big deal in and by itself. But when we start talking about a pandemic and it being affecting a whole country or a whole world, it's really impactful. And the most kind of stark reminder of just how impactful it is looking at, the fancy word is mortality rate. But what that really means is the number of people that have died as a result of COVID. And at this point, within the United States, over 500,000 people have died as a result of COVID. And that is certainly like a wake-up call as it relates to just how serious the disease is. But even in the chat room, we learned about some of our friends and colleagues who were hospitalized, or had friends and family members that were hospitalized and we weren't able to visit with them, or in the most severe situations, friends or families that may have died as a result. Several countries have handled it very, very differently through lockdowns and other ways to try and minimize the spread. The three things that we've learned in fast order with a fair amount of experience that do help control the spread of COVID. Those three things are wearing our mask. I saw some of our friends on the call are wearing their mask. Social distancing. We talked a little bit about that, and from social distancing, how the things we miss, and actually hand washing. And hand washing, even though it doesn't sound very exciting, or I'll use the word sexy, the reason hand washing is so helpful, that there's a combination of the soap and water actually physically helps get the virus off of our bodies. The alcohol is also very good because that kills it. But just those three things: wearing a mask, great job for all that are continuing to do that, distancing ourselves from others, and hand washing. Thank you, Aisha. Now, we started and kind of ended that slide as it relates to over 500,000 deaths. The reality is that a lot of people who get COVID just develop relatively mild symptoms, kind of a severe cold and such like that. But, and this is the important part, it's an important but, there are certain conditions, whether it's heart conditions, cancer, diabetes, kidney disease, that increase the risk of us getting more sick and being at risk for death. And intellectual disabilities are one of they in medicine, in doctors call it comorbidities, but other conditions that we have to really ramp up or pay particular attention to, because the risk of developing more severe disease is more present for those patients and those family members and those friends with those conditions. Thank you, Aisha. But I think I'm kind of the person who starts that conversation, and then but the good news is we're with vaccines and from all the good behavior we've had, I think we're closer and closer to getting back to a more normal state.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frost. Yes, for sure, that gives us a really good primer into why our program especially has been taking this pandemic seriously. And in fact, I've heard from physicians and experts that this is one of the, if not the deadliest infectious disease event that we have experienced in our lifetime. So we're not taking any chances. We're taking this really seriously. So thank you. And I think that brings up to our next part, which is Sean, if you could give us a good overview of, our response as a program to this pandemic specifically.
Yeah, thanks, Aisha. Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. So when we got together as a state to decide and look into and come up with some ideas of how we can get our athletes back together, we looked in a couple different places. We wanted to talk to our area directors. We wanted to talk to parents. We wanted to talk to health professionals and our staff. So we put that together to create our Return to Activity Committee. And as you can see there, we have lots of different people on there, and those include Dr. Frost from LifePoint. We have a couple doctors. One's a pediatrician. We have several area directors. We have some parents and the staff members. So that was our group together that came, and we met several months in a row, once a week, to look at what was going on in the state, in the country, in our counties, locally, and make some decisions on how we could possibly return to activity once we saw some dip in the numbers as we are seeing in the spring here. So yeah, thanks, Aisha. So that's our crew, and it's a great crew, and they've been I've been very thankful for their input and their time as we kind of navigate the pandemic. So in case you didn't know, Special Olympics, the worldwide organization has broken down our return to play or return to activity into 4 different phases. For most of this last year, we've been in phase 0. Phase 0 is, I think it's hard to believe, but we went to phase 0 March 13th, 2020, like right before the state basketball tournament. We had our regional basketball tournament at Ensworth, and then we were preparing for the next state basketball tournament, and that's when we shut down, and we have not had an in-person event since then, and we've been in phase 0. Recently, we've moved to phase 1, which is allowing our athletes back into training, and it's been really good to see our athletes. I was watching a video of one of our athletes out doing golf and doing some work on the golf course this week, which was really exciting. But it's still a very limited ability to practice and do things, but it is good that they can get out, see their friends, even though if they're 6 feet away, and do some things. And then you can see phase 2 is our next movement, hopefully in the future. And then phase 3 is just back to normal, where we're back to our full-on events and full-on kind of the way you guys remember Special Olympics. But right now we are in phase 1. So moving on, and Lisa, Dr. Frost, Aisha, feel free to jump in if I say something dumb but did you go back? Is that phase 1 to phase 2? Did you skip a slide? There we are. Okay. So the phase 0 to phase 1 is which we went through just recently. And with the committee, we had a lot of good discussion, and we had to see a continued decline in cases over a 2-week period, which we saw. We have an infection rate under 1, which we did have for a length of time. And then the metric that I really kind of put it all together was this one from Georgia Tech, where it looks at the number of people at an event and tells you what the percentage chance of somebody having COVID at an event with that many people. So what was nice about that is I can look at an event with 10 people and see what the percentages are, because that works in perfectly with phase 1. Or I can look at an event with 50 people, which is phase 2, and see what those percentages are for phase 1 and phase 2. So that was our first thing as the RTAs. We put that to the board of directors for Special Olympics, voted on that to a phase, and are now in right now. So that was phase 1. So now we are currently in phase 1. You can go to the next slide. Phase 1 to phase 2. So this is what we're waiting for right now. I know a lot of probably parents and athletes are on the call right now, is when can we get out into phase 2 and do some more fun stuff, you know, throwing some footballs around and swimming and things like that, where it's a little bit more open. And phase 2, we need to see basically a steady of cases, new cases. So it doesn't have to necessarily be going down, because eventually it's not going to go down, but it can't be going steadily up. It just needs to stay steady. We need to continue to see that infection rate below 1. And then the same, we have to be under 10% for a risk factor at events with 50 people. So we just would slide up from 10-person events to 50-person events. And that's how we're going to get to phase 2, which will open up some things. I know the regional events that we're planning in May, June, and July across the state absolutely require a phase 2. Our golf events actually do not require phase 2 because of the nature of golf. We were able to keep 10 people limited. So we're going to be able to run our golf events still. We're excited. We're going back to our first event at Henry Horton in May, which is very exciting. But we are going to have to get to phase 2 to be able to do our regional events that we're planning in the May in Middle Tennessee, June in East Tennessee, and West Tennessee in August. So that is our kind of our phases that we have. And then phase 2 to phase 3 is kind of so far away that we really haven't really talked about that, honestly, as an RTA. We're still kind of looking at what's happening right now with phase 2. And I think we'll see, that's going to be something we get closer to, hopefully maybe in the fall with return to play for our bowling and flag football. So every day I live this life of checking our cases and how we're doing right now. If you haven't seen in the last probably 2 days, we've actually, if you can see the red lines there that have the daily cases, you can see it's been pretty steady. You can see, you know, with that big drop of why we are able to go up to phase 1, but you can see how it's kind of just in the last couple of days trickled back up, which is not a good sign for us going to phase 2, to be honest. That is the cases. Do you have each one, Aisha, per slide? Oh, look at her being all ready with everything. All right. So our infection rate in the last probably 2 days has jumped over 1 for the first time in probably 2 months, maybe. So we actually technically right now are in what we call our kind of transition period. So we're waiting to see if that evens out. If it does not, in the next 10 days, we'll actually be having to go back to phase 0. But the infection rate tends to be a little bit volatile. So that's why we put that 10-day kind of medium, like almost like just a waiting period, just to see if that's really what's happening. Because sometimes you'll see that infection rate go like this. The other two things that we are looking at are been very steady. The Georgia Tech assessment with under 10 people has been very consistently under 10% across the state. I'm assuming that's what she's going to show next. Oh, look at her. Good job, Aisha. So this is what we use for one of my favorite thing is it actually shows you can look at each county and see what the percentage rates are. And across the state, we are under 10% risk factor for events that are 10 and under. So that's why we are able to be in phase 1. If she were to pop that up on the bottom left in that event size to 50, you would see it jump into pretty standard in that 25 to 30% range as far as the percentage chance of somebody having COVID at an event with 50 people. That's why we're not in phase 2 yet. So I'm happy to answer as we get to the end any questions about those 3 metrics that the committee came together with, but that's what we are looking at every day. So let's see, let me move this over here. It is possible to go back like we talked about. If they're exceeded, like we talked about, this kind of 10-day monitoring period. If we have to go back, the RTA will meet and decide that it is time to go back to phase 0. We're definitely seeing a little bit of an uptick after spring break. Right now, if you kind of look at some of the numbers, it's not dramatic. It's kind of a race between the vaccinations and the variants right now. So hopefully it will continue to stay steady or go back down here. So that's what we're hoping. But we do have some flexibility and we have put in parameters as far as how we can move back and forth between the different phases. So we knew that one of the things I've learned probably the most in the last year with the pandemic is whatever I really think is going to happen doesn't happen. It's just you learn a lot and things change quickly, and you're told something different every month sometimes. So just being flexible and I really have appreciated all of our RTA people on there that have given a lot of insight and perspective. So going back to return to activity, every single athlete, coach, unified partner that wants to participate with Special Olympics will have to do a new waiver. There's also what's called a code of conduct that will have to be filled out. We're working on putting those together. They actually just, Special Olympics International just updated that. So we haven't put it back out because I didn't want to have everybody sign it. And in the last 2 weeks, 100 million people do it. And then they're like, put the brakes on, there's a new one, and then have to redo it. But anybody that is planning to get out there in phase 1 or 2 here in the next couple months, they will have to sign the waiver and the code of conduct, and including the normal Special Olympics paperwork and fun that we do to get out on there. So moving on.
Thanks so much, Sean, for sharing that, that journey that the RTA committee took to kind of like build out these metrics to kind of determine whether or not it's safe for athletes to get on the field and play. And just to let everybody know, these decisions weren't taken lightly. Obviously, we're taking this very seriously, especially given the fact that, COVID has an increased risk on our population, on athletes. We want to be very careful. But I think that this slide, Dr. Frost, you already even talked a little bit about this at the very beginning of this presentation about things that we can keep doing to kind of get us on track with COVID transmission. So that means that we're decreasing these numbers, we're reducing risk for transmission. And the things that you have already been doing, things like social distancing, wearing your masks. I know hygiene and hand sanitizing, everybody's been hand washing a lot more, disinfecting, high contact areas of your home. That's still very important. But now we have another piece to that puzzle, which is the vaccine. The vaccine is now available to everybody who's 16 and over. So that's going to be also another part of that equation that gets us even closer to getting to phase 2 and ultimately phase 3. And that would be quote unquote back to normal. Right now, we are dealing with a lot of, just misinformation, just not a lot of people are aware of what their options are in terms of kind of, especially with vaccines. So I just want to reiterate, don't get discouraged. This is part of the process. And certainly Dr. Frost is here to answer any questions that folks have about, vaccine, or if there are any concerns around that too.
Yeah, you should just, if I could add, because sometimes repetition is good. First, I just want to call out, Sean was so nice to highlight the engagement of all the Return to Activity Committee. Just also wanted to share that Sean's been an amazing leader as it relates to the Return to Activity. You saw that every day he goes through all of those, the data that is needed to keep you all safe and to kind of monitor our course towards return to activity. But just to reiterate, say again, the three things: the social distancing, the mask wearing, and the hand washing is best, and the alcohol sanitizer is great too. Just real quick point of comparison: we're talking about COVID right now. We also track things like flu. And what's amazing is, for as bad as COVID has been, this past flu season has been really, really tiny relative to prior years. And it's because these three things work. And Aisha said it perfectly. One of the most powerful things in our, I guess they say sort of quiver of arrows in our toolbox is the vaccines now to get us even more protected. So thanks, Aisha, for letting me repeat some of that.
Okay, I think we're good to go to the next slide. And this is just to reiterate that even though we're kind of hovering between hovering at phase 1, we're just at the, hopefully going to go progress into phase 2, which means that we'll be congregating in groups of 50. But in the meantime, please don't discount the opportunities which are, occurring online and virtually. So we have fitness challenges which are occurring. In fact, right now we have the Sona Move Challenge, which is being hosted, and we regularly have healthy athletes opportunities to encourage athletes to maintain their health in the meantime. Unified Champion Schools is continuing its activities, and so is Young Athletes. All of those programs are being hosted in virtual spaces right now until we're good to do them in person again. So definitely make sure that you're visiting our website. It's been revamped. It looks beautiful. Sean had played a major hand in making it look as good as it does. So it should be really easy for you all to access the resources that way. Okay, so I think that means we're good to start the community discussion. And actually, before we start opening it up to questions, I did want to invite Lisa to share her 2 cents about what COVID has meant on the area level perspective. As she is the area director for Memphis, she has done a huge amount of work to make sure that she's still connecting with athletes in a virtual world. And she'll be sharing a few insights about how this whole pandemic has affected her program, the activities that she was able to roll out despite those challenges, and then, creative ways that, she's been able to address everything. So thank you so much, Lisa, for spending, time with us tonight. Jordan, I think you can stop sharing the slide now.
Yes, so it's been a little, as we know, difficult financially wise, but also when it happened, we were trying to figure out what can we do to keep the athletes interacted, because I would get calls left and right, when are we going to start? So we started a virtual program that we offer actually 6 days a week. Twice a day, we'll have different workouts. We also offer 2 cooking classes through the month. We set up where they can play bingo. So we've just gotten really creative, because even when we start back, we're going to keep the virtual games and activities going, because it's not going to be the same at the beginning. And we want to be able to serve everyone in our population. So that's been kind of just getting really creative.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Do you want to share more specific examples of what you were able to roll out despite everything?
Yeah, so what we do is, so Monday through Friday, we offer 2 different walking workout classes that we can do online. The athletes will join them, and we do that. Also, we've done a scavenger hunt online. We've played bingo. We started doing healthy eating classes. So Thursday night will be our dinner. We usually do a dinner one, and then on Saturday mornings we'll do a morning one, so that they can cook. We've done different challenges and trying to get everyone to communicate with each other.
Thank you. And I mean, I don't, and I just know that for the area directors who are on this call, you might have even gotten instances of your own athletes having to deal with, COVID or an infection. And I mean, Lisa, we don't have to share on this call what that looked like for you, but it's just to kind of let you all know that we see you, we know that it's hard, the struggle is real, and the circumstances about, around which we work and live right now are just really stressful. So we see.
Yeah, we've had quite a few that have gotten COVID, and then personally, I've had people that have gotten COVID. So it's been kind of scary and tricky times right now, and no one's. A lot of people don't feel 100% safe coming back at all, even at phase 1. So.
Okay. Thank you.
And if
Lisa.
any director would like to me send them our monthly schedule and join our Zoom classes, we would be more than happy to have you.
Thank you so much for sharing those resources, Lisa, and for being open to just, being part of that conversation, and for giving kind of people that, on the ground, real life perspective. Because I know that, we try our best to, to see what's going on in your areas, but you guys are you're the first responders, so to speak, in terms of what is the reality for what you're dealing with in your area, in your community, with your friends, your coaches, your colleagues, teammates. You guys know the truth. All right, and I think this brings us to a good point where we can open up the discussion for a Q&A. So anybody who has questions that they'd like to kind of pose to the panelists, you're more than welcome to kind of put them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask them that way. We have been confronted with a few so far, and I know that not to call you out, Dr. Frost, but if you feel comfortable, at least, starting off this conversation about kind of the rumblings that I've been certainly hearing about, that the vaccine was developed a little bit too fast for people's liking. Is that something we should be concerned about? Maybe go a little bit more into that.
Oops, I was muted. You bet. And yeah, just as I answer Aisha's first question, really are open to any questions. We'll always be honest. If we don't know the answer, we'll just say, "Gosh darn it, we don't know the answer to that," but we'll look it up and see if we can get the answer to you in the future. But nothing's sort of off limits. So it's interesting, Aisha. You're right. That some are concerned that the vaccines were developed at a really fast pace, and that with that fast pace of development, could they maybe not be quite as effective as other vaccines that have kind of stood the test of time? Well, the fact of the matter is the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, the two vaccines that were released back in December, have somewhere around a 95% efficacy or effectiveness rate. What that means is, I know this is going to sound a little silly, but if you lined up 100 people and gave them vaccines, 95 out of those 100 people would walk away with, sort of I like Star Trek. So sort of a force field around their ship, a force field around their body after getting two vaccines. 95 out of 100 people walk away after two vaccines with that force field. So the data, the study shows that they're actually very, very effective. Also, the technology, I'm going to get really technical for just a second. The technology, something called mRNA technology, was being developed for over 20 years. And interestingly, I didn't know this before COVID, but one of the reasons that technology was being developed was in anticipation of a pandemic, so that if the scientists and the doctors needed to move fast, they knew they would need a model to build from. And that's what the mRNA vaccine distribution process allowed. So Aisha, it is a great question. And even though the vaccine was developed relatively rapidly. It's building on the foundation of over 20 years worth of work. And remember, 95 out of 100, after you receive 2 vaccines, walk away with that Star Trek force shield around their ship or body. It's a great question.
Thanks so much for
Diane?
answering
Yeah,
it,
Diane.
Dr. Frost. But anyone else who's part of the call who wants to kind of go into the chat or unmute themselves, you're more than welcome to at this time. Or even if you want to vent your frustrations, because I know that, despite us, hoping to answer all these questions and to have a very clear and direct road to, return to in-person activities, it's actually a lot more complicated than even we anticipated it to be. So you're welcome to let us know your thoughts about that as well. Anything coming through the chat? Oh no, just compliments to you, Dr. Frost. That was a really good response though.
Well, while people are kind of finding their voice or organizing their ideas, another thing that maybe I'll just spontaneously speak to is, hey, Dr. Frost, you just said after I get those 2 vaccines, I've got a force field around myself. Does that mean I can stop wearing my mask and stop doing all the precautions? And it's a great question. I guess I kind of asked it myself, so I can't say great question to myself, so that wasn't fair. But it is a good question. And the answer is, unfortunately, no. We know that the vaccines will help protect you from developing an infection, but the vaccines don't necessarily stop the virus from entering your body. And if they enter your body, it is possible that you might, not on purpose, of course, but end up spreading that virus to friends or families or fellow athletes. So because out of an abundance of caution, because there's a lot of things we don't know, even though you are vaccinated, I was vaccinated, I still wear the mask, I still practice social distancing, and you all remember the third thing of those 3, do a lot of hand washing. So just because you have had the vaccine, you still have to, or encouraged to do those other 3 things that we keep highlighting.
Thanks so much, Dr. Frost. Another thing that I had been kind of, asked, which is, the religious concerns, which is kind of, is the vaccine compatible with my religious beliefs? I'm concerned that there are, components in the vaccine which, could affect my DNA perhaps. I know I'm combining 2 separate concepts here, but thought it'd be interesting to fold them together.
Yes, you did combine 2 different concepts. So I'm gonna take them. I'm gonna kind of restate the question and answer them in turn. And just so you all know, the places. So we've done a lot of studying at LifePoint and with Special Olympics on this. But I really want to get everybody very accurate information. So the places that are really great for answering questions like these are the CDC, Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And also John Hopkins is a trusted medical resource, and they have some great question and answers, and also Mayo Clinic as well. But that's not a way of ducking and dodging Aisha's question. So does it affect my DNA? So the answer is no. One of the reasons it gets a little bit confusing is I told you that the vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, use something called mRNA. mRNA is very different than DNA. So this is a very quick science lesson. If you picture like in your body, you have lots and lots of cells. So think of a cell as the basketball. And inside that basketball is something called a nucleus. And that's kind of the brain of the cell. And so think of the nucleus as a tennis ball inside the basketball. And inside that tennis ball is where all your DNA lives. And the DNA is so important because determines your eye color and your hair color. It has some influence on your athletic prowess, and all the Special Olympic athletes are blessed with really good DNA for athletic prowess. But it's sort of the blueprint for the body. The vaccine never goes in at all into that tennis ball. The mRNA stays in that in-between space between the outside of the basketball or the inside of the basketball and the outside of that tennis ball. The mRNA is sort of a workbench. I know I'm getting way too much detail. I promise I'll be done here in a second. The mRNA is kind of a workbench. And in the cell, what's built on that workbench are the proteins that your body recognizes and then develops antibodies to fight the virus. So when you're getting the vaccine, you're never getting the vaccine injected into the body. You're just kind of providing just enough ingredients to make the body say, hey, I got to make antibodies against that. So if the virus gets in your body says, oh, I know what to do now. I'm going to make these antibodies to fight it off. So the vaccine is never given, the virus is never given to you. And the whole way the vaccine works, it never comes in contact or alters your DNA whatsoever. That is a really great question, Aisha.
Thank you so much, Dr. Frost. And actually it looks like Eve, you have a question. Do you mind if we swing by at you in a couple moments, because we have a few questions that came through the chat. Sean, are you still on?
Yep. I'm here.
Yes, it looks like these questions would be best directed at you. And this one from Nicole is a really great question, which is, are we requiring folks to receive a vaccine before they start practice or competition?
They do not. We've received guidance from Special Olympics International that there is no requirements for athletes to receive a vaccination as of right now. The one thing I would say to everybody on the call is things change over time. So I say that now, and if there's a year later and that's changed, we talked about seeing some college and universities that are going to require vaccination to go back to school in the fall. So I could, I'm saying right now, there's definitely no requirement for vaccination. However, I'm putting the caveat on it that don't shoot the messenger if we come back in September and something changes. But I would say right now, there is none of that. I'm looking at some of these other questions. Will masks, face covering be required for athletes during participation? They are required to wear masks and be social distanced outside in our phase 1. As we roll into different phases, that perhaps would change. For example, they probably wouldn't be required to wear them while playing basketball, doing basketball drills in phase 2 if they can remain social distance, because it is hard to play in those. Can't wear a mask. Face shields are also an option, and as another possibility. Let's see what other questions we have. Do seasonal sports practices start up? Some sports are able to start up now, some are not. For example, team sports right now, in the essence of what they are, and team sports cannot happen right now because there's no contact. For example, basketball, flag football, things like that cannot happen. Golf right now is a sport that could happen. Bocce, if they're using their own equipment, can happen. You could do track practices if they're saying socially distanced. That would be a sport you could do. However, it would be hard to. You could do basketball if everybody had their own basketball and they're standing in a different sections of the basketball court by themselves, and you were practicing dribbling and you were keeping them. I mean, if you had a group under 10 and you had everybody had their own basketball and you were keeping them separate, yes, you could do basketball, but there would be no sharing of equipment in phase 1 and no contact, no of what basketball looks like. Same with soccer. You could do that with soccer. A lot of soccer clubs back in the last summer did that, where they would have individual training sessions, and you could have 2 or 3 athletes and they could be working on their foot skills and drills and things like that. You could also do fitness workouts, where you have, the yogas and the workouts and things like that, the strength building outside together. where you're in your kind of 6x6 grids and things like that. You could do that. Those are some of the opportunities. Hope that helps.
Okay, thank you, Tim, or Sean, sorry, Sean.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sean. And actually, I think Eve, you were raising your hand for a question, or did your question
Yes,
get answered?
No, well, the swimming, my daughter was concerned about swimming. He did not mention swimming, so I'm sure that's not.
Swimming's a possibility right now. The phase 1 that we're in right now is outdoor only. So if there's a plan presented to the RTA for an outdoor pool, that would be a possibility of being approved. So one of the things, the steps are you have to do all your physicals and your waiver, and then you have to submit, the area director has to submit a request to the state to say, hey, we want to do bocce, we want to do swimming. We're going to do swimming at the Jimmy Floyd Family Center outdoor pool. We're going to have less than 10 people. They're going to do, we're going to have lanes 1 and 4 running at the same time, and everyone else will be separated outside on the deck saying socially distance. All right, you present that plan. We would, we take it to the staff. We would decide if that would be approved. But not right now, the way phase 1 is set, indoor events are not happening. So our hope is once we get to phase 2 that phase 2 would include some indoor events. Hope that helps.
Sunny asked that.
Sean, when we gonna do
No.
swimming?
My question was about the J&J vaccine. He mentioned the whatever that was. The Johnson & Johnson is not made on the same principle?
So the
Passing that one off.
No, Sean, you can take it. No, it's a great question. You're exactly right. The mRNA, it's short for messenger RNA, is Pfizer and Moderna. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is made on a different principle. And a little bit of background on the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is there's a pause button on that right now. Some of the guideline organizations specifically convened for COVID vaccines are expected to potentially make a recommendation as early as this Friday on how to safely use that vaccine. But I bet many have heard that 6 women who received the Johnson & Johnson vaccine developed a blood clot in the brain. There's a fancy phrase for it, but in essence, it's a blood clot in the brain. And they don't know for sure that the vaccine caused that, but out of an abundance of caution, they hit the pause button on distributing the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And I think there'll be an additional announcement possibly as early as this Friday on revised use of that. 6 is a scary number, but just to put it in context, over 6 to 8 million doses of that vaccine were given. So if you take, I'm not very good at math, but if you take 6 divided by 6 million, that ends up being like 0.0001% of the patients were impacted. It sounds like I'm trivializing it or minimizing it. I'm not at all. I think the abundance of caution is absolutely the right approach. But it's a very, very small number of individuals that were impacted, but it's very important to the people that were impacted. We should take it seriously. Long answer for a short question. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is a different science, a different methodology than the Pfizer and the Moderna. Great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, Eve. Really, really appreciate that. And thanks so much, Dr. Frost, for walking us through that answer, because I couldn't describe or explain or even begin to explain why there's a difference. But certainly the pause, yeah, makes sense. So am I seeing any other questions? We do have a minute or two before, we're going to start, the process of concluding this call. I think we're at the point where if I don't see a question, I am going to ask all participants to just complete a 3-question poll, which kind of wraps up this conversation. But just to let you all know that the Special Olympics Tennessee team, we see you, we understand the frustration. We have the same concerns too. We're just doing what we can to be as safe and as responsible with return to in-person activities as possible. And a big piece of that puzzle will be the vaccine, because we have so many things in our toolboxes right now at our disposal. Obviously, social distancing, which we're very familiar with, mask wearing, hand washing. Now we have another, part. We have another thing that we can include in our toolkit to make us safer and to get us that much closer to in-person activities. So, Adam. Oh, Adam, I'm so sorry. Yes, Adam, do you have a question for us before we proceed with the poll?
I do. I think one of the major questions that I've received from area directors and parents and athletes is if all the athletes in a group of 10 with coaches have received the vaccine, can they practice together and have contact? Basically, can they bypass that phase if they've received the vaccine? Everyone in their groups received the vaccine, say on a basketball team, can they continue on in phase 3, even though we're in a different phase? Sean, I'll let you take that.
No, thank you very much. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. No, they're not allowed yet. I mean, there might be more guidance coming in there. I think that's something that's we'll learn more as, but the vaccine is pretty much has nothing to do ultimately with the phases and how we implement those, I guess is the best way to describe that.
Thanks, Sean. All right, so folks, if everyone could just take a moment to answer this poll. There are only 3 questions, and it'll definitely help us understand more about how we can make future events like this better. So why don't we just take a minute or 2 to answer 3 questions before we start closing out the call and doing dinner if we haven't done that yet. Yeah, and you probably already know that I'm looking at question 3 to see how many folks have, at least received 1 vaccine. And I am very pleased to see that, folks on this call, about 71% of the people who participate in this poll have received at least 1 or both COVID vaccines. That's amazing. We are all doing our part to, try to get us back together again. I'm pleased to see. So I'm going to give folks a couple more moments, maybe a few more seconds to finish this poll. Thank you so much, everyone, for finishing that out. Thank you.
I have a question for Chris.
Go ahead.
Just to clarify, you said that 95% vaccine, that was the Pfizer? Was that the Pfizer vaccine?
The answer is yes. It was the Pfizer and Moderna. One was 95% and the other was 92%. I'm trying to be too specific. I'm sorry. The answer is yes. That was the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. Correct.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks for the question. Yes.
Okay, just thought I would share the poll results with everybody, and just to highlight question number 3 for the folks to know how many of us on this call have been able to receive 1 or both vaccines. It's about 75%, and that's fantastic. I'm going to stop sharing those results and just compliment you all for doing your part to get us closer. And again, there are, this vaccine might not be appropriate for all folks. It's up to you and your provider to discuss whether or not it's something that's, an option for you, for sure. And obviously folks who are under 16 aren't currently eligible. Am I correct, Dr. Frost?
Yes, correct. 16 and over right now.
Fantastic.
Dr. Frost, is there any what's the word on vaccinations for under 16? Is that something that's coming down the pipe, or is that are they working on that?
Yeah, the answer is yes. The answer is yes, but I don't know anything more than that very general answer to your question,
Gotcha.
Sean. But I know that that is being studied literally as we speak. Yes.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. We covered a lot of ground this call, and I'm sure that we're gonna have a lot more information as we progress with our return to in-person activities. We're going through this process together. We're learning together. We're growing together, but we're certainly doing it together. So keep a lookout for more updates as they come. Again, thank you so much for my wonderful panelists, Dr. Frost, Sean, Lisa, thank you so much for sharing kind of your expertise. Thank you so much for everybody who was able to join on the call. And certainly thank you so much to our intern, Jordan, for managing the slides. I think, yes, this has been a team effort for sure. And just thank you so much for your time. And I guess hopefully everyone has wonderful dinner plans coming up. Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Great to
night.
see everybody. Thank you all.
Bye.
Say it now.
Can I talk?
Hey, Adam. Hey, Adam.
Can I talk to
Just,
Adam?
no, just say, hey, Adam.
Hey, Adam.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you. When we going to get back together?
That was enough questions. Thank
Hopefully
you.
soon. We're hoping soon. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Good to see you. Oh, is that your puppy? What's your dog's name? Cutie.
Dante.
Ah,
Dante.
nice. Beautiful puppy. Well, good to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Good to
Good to
Have a
see
good
you.
night.
You too. Bye.
See ya.